G'day guys, how are you going today? We are reviewing a 2002 Holden Commodore Calais. For those of you who don't know, Holden is the Chevrolet of Australia. The Commodore was the Australian-built full-size sedan, and the Calais is the top-of-the-line Commodore. And the reason I'm reviewing this early 2000s GM product is because it comes with the L67 supercharged V6 engine that is insane. That supercharger whine is next level. We're going to start today's review by talking about how it looks.
It is very 90s, don't get me wrong, but it is still very appealing.
Then we're going to get into the interior and see what a 2002 Holden Commodore Calais, a luxury version of the Commodore, looks like. Amazing what you can achieve when you don't try and become a coupe. Then we're going to see how it drives. At the back end, you just lose it. And finally, we're going to end on, is this car worth picking up? And spoiler, absolutely. I've borrowed this one from a subscriber here in Melbourne, and you can go down there now and click the link to check out the listing of this car. Let me just say, this car is beautiful. Anyway, let's get on to how it looks.
Starting with the front of the Calais, it really does look like it's from the 1990s, which I suppose it is, because look how small the front grille is. This is definitely very different to anything you'll find today. For example, the CLS I just reviewed, which you can click up there now to watch, has a way bigger grille, and so does pretty much every other car on the market today. And it's not just the grille that's been squashed. These headlights have also been squashed. These fog lights down the bottom, they're oval shaped. They're not circular, they're oval shaped fog lights. It's a very weird look, but I suppose it's in keeping with the times where everything was just a bit smaller, a bit more squashed down. Being the Calais, it also gets some chrome over the very, very small grille and over the fog lights as well. And the look of the front of the Calais is actually quite appealing. It is very 90s, don't get me wrong, but it is still very appealing.
I'll be honest, there isn't much else to talk about in the rear of the Calais. It's just a large, full-size sedan that has a quite nice rear, considering it comes out of something of a 90s design, but it is pretty cool nonetheless. In keeping with the 2020 trend of light bar everything, this 2002 Calais also has a light bar, except it's not a light bar, it's just a giant reflector. Otherwise, the rear of the Calais isn't all that special. There is a chrome strip, very small, but it's there, that runs along the back, and also it has a real exhaust pipe, which you don't see in any modern day vehicle today. So props to a 2002 car for having a real exhaust tip. Overall, even though this 2002 Calais is almost 18 years old, I think it looks absolutely gorgeous, especially in this Vespa blue. It's like a blue pearlescent with purple, and depending on the way that the light hits, it changes color. I really like the look of it. And these rims, even though they're only 16 inches, they do look very elitist, and I think it suits the personality of the car as well. Now let's move on to the interior, but before we do, make sure you go down there and subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so we can get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. With your guys' help and support, we can keep getting these cool, quirky cars from mates, from family, and from manufacturers as well. So really do go down there, hit that subscribe button, and say hello in the comments below. Anyway, onto the interior. The interior of this car is just the place to be. The seats are so comfortable. Now, as I said, this is the luxury version of the Holden Commodore. And as a result, you get these couch-like seats that you just don't find in any other car these days. They're made of really nice leather. They're completely power adjustable. They are fantastic to sit in longer journeys especially. I did a few hundred kilometers in this car this week, and my God, is it comfortable. The steering wheel, though, is not so good, and if you're a subscriber, you'll know how much I care about my steering wheel. This steering wheel is polyurethane. It's pretty cheap in the hands, even as the top of the line model. It's not out of place though for an early 2000s GM product, especially to get a plastic steering wheel. But it certainly feels out of place in a car that is supposed to be luxury. Now, the owner of this car has kept the CD stacker in here, the original infotainment, well, you can't even call it that, the original radio that came with this car, pulled it out and put in an aftermarket head unit. This head unit is way better because it has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, and you can control all the media from the steering wheel as well, like you would be able to in a lot of modern day cars. And yes, this car did come as standard with infotainment controls on the steering wheel, which is pretty good for a car, as I said, early 2000s. The Calais also has dual zone climate control in a car from the early 2000s. I was very impressed when I saw that. But the buttons on it feel awfully plastic and cheap and nasty. But again, 2000s GM product. The rest of the interior is okay. The door sills do have a nice bit of leather on them, and it's actually quite a lot of leather, which is really surprising. But the rest of the interior is very plasticky. We have soft touch plastics, which is quite nice up here. That's meant to mimic leather. Everywhere else is cheap plastic everywhere. In the center console as well, we have a huge gear selector, and even more funny than that is this huge handbrake. It's absolutely ginormous, completely out of place in this car, and it is quite awkward to wrap your hands around. And the controls for all of the windows are in the center console as well, which is quite interesting. It's actually very accessible, but it's not intuitive. So what about the rear seats? This is, after all, a full-sized luxury sedan. It is really comfortable back there. In fact, it is again like a couch. Leather everywhere, even on the door sills. I have plenty of leg room, plenty of toe room, and plenty of headroom. Much more than I had in the CLS I just reviewed, which you can click up there to watch. It's amazing what you can achieve when you don't try and become a coupe. It has a center armrest, which doesn't do very much. It doesn't have any cup holders or anything, but at least you have a center armrest. In the back seats as well, you have this funny looking air vent thing, which looks like a person screaming. It is a little bit off-putting, but on the other hand, it's also kind of funny. And finally, the boot. It is quite large. It's definitely not the biggest boot out there, and it was actually kind of surprising that it wasn't very big, but it's big enough. It does the job all right. The only downside is you can't put down the rear seats. You can only put down the center pass-through, which isn't very much. Let's be honest with ourselves. No one's buying this car because of its 2000s luxury interior. They're buying it because of this L67 engine, and this one specifically has not been modified, which is very, very rare. Now, if we put the car into power mode, it doesn't have sport mode, but it has power mode, we can give it a little bit of push. Oh, the supercharger whine in this thing is awesome. It sounds so good. If you haven't driven a supercharged car before, it's very linear power, and that's what you get in this Calais. Now, it's only got 171 kilowatts of power, and it only has 375 Newton meters of torque. But this engine is really special because of how easy it is to tune. If you spend between 2,000 to 3,000 Australian dollars, you can get this car to run the quarter mile in under 12 seconds. That is faster than a Porsche Cayman GT4. Crazy. And it's all driven in a 4-speed automatic transmission, which is pretty average. It's a GM automatic transmission. I mean, it does the job all right, but it is pretty average. And all driven to the rear wheels. And in Australia, this kind of engine is what's given it such a bad reputation as a hooning vehicle. They're so easy to tune. They're so easy to modify and get so much power out of them that people have given it a bad name because they drive it like idiots. Which, I'll be fair, is hard not to do when you're driving it. At the back end, you just lose it. My biggest complaints are this automatic transmission. The 4-speed is a bit lurchy, certainly isn't the best transmission out there. I mean, what car these days comes out in a 4-speed automatic transmission except for a $20,000 Fiat? And also this handling, it's not the best. It is a bit odd. It's got power steering, of course, but it's quite sensitive, but also not sensitive. I don't even know how to describe it. In fact, you could describe it as not having much feel on the road. It feels more like a land yacht than it does a sports car. But we put it back in power mode and... oh, nuts! Nuts! This car is nuts! I might have to buy it myself. I can't afford it, but if I could. And it's not even that expensive. The owner has it listed for 7,000 Australian dollars. That's not very much considering what you get. If you guys subscribe more, please go down there and subscribe. Maybe one day I can afford a car like this. In terms of tuning, you can read the article down below. If you spend about that 2,500 mark, you can get 1,000 Newton meters of torque, 275 rear wheel kilowatt of power. Just crazy numbers, and that's what gets you to that below 12 seconds. Wouldn't you want a car as fast as a Porsche Cayman GT4, especially a sleeper like this, a car your grandfather might drive? So should you buy a 2002 Holden Commodore Calais? If this supercharged engine has not done anything for you, there might be something wrong with you. Go to a doctor, get yourself checked out. It is so much fun and it is cheap, really cheap. This car's done 110,000 kilometers and it's only $7,000. That is nothing. And for what you get, if you put another $2,000 of mods into this car, you get an incredibly powerful car. In my opinion, it's a no-brainer, absolutely. If only I had that kind of money available to me, I would be purchasing this car today. And it's so comfy. I gotta hear that supercharger whine one more time. Oh, yes. And that's it, the 2002 Holden Commodore Calais. It is a car that has the potential to beat a Porsche Cayman GT4 in a quarter-mile race. And I'm sure these kids would agree with me that this is one of the best value cars, most tunable cars that you can purchase today, and it's a bargain. Remember, this one's for sale, so go down there, check it out in the link below. You will be very happy if you grab one of these, and don't even tune it, but you should definitely tune it. Make sure you go down there, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, comment down below what you guys think of the VX Mark II Commodore. It is a car I absolutely love, especially with this supercharged V6 engine, but maybe you disagree with me. Let me know down there, and I'll catch you next time.